Hello and welcome to this brand new podcast called the Visual Storytelling Podcast. I am so happy to be launching this one, and here's a couple of reasons why. If you followed me throughout the years on other platforms such as my YouTube channel or on this very platform, which is Apple Podcast and Google Play and Spotify Podcast and so on, you know one thing, you know that I'm pretty passionate about storytelling. And I think there's never been a better day, a better age, a better time to be telling your story. If you want to tell your story, the technology is readily available. The technology has become very, very accessible, very easy to use also. All you need is usually, at least to get started with, a phone, some access to the internet, which is pretty ubiquitous these days. And, if you want to push it a little bit further, maybe a laptop and a decent camera, decent mirrorless camera. But ultimately, I want this podcast to be about the art of telling our stories in this day and age, in this connected day and age. I truly believe that there's no more offline or online. There's just one line, and that one line is always connected. So how do you tell stories? How do you tell bit-sized stories in this day and age? This is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be interviewing people that are using different tools to tell their stories. I'm thinking about a couple people that I already have in mind that I'm working on, some people that you already love and that you already listen to. But I want to take, a slightly different angle. You know that I'm a gearhead also. I really, really like gear. So we will talk about if gear matters. We will talk about the different aspect and why some people are choosing to shoot, Fujifilm and Nikon and Canon and so on. This is I would say a revolution in time, because for approximately, between $500 and $2,000, you can definitely have some very, very good equipment, some equipment that people would die for back then and would have to pay thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Same goes for audio. I'm actually recording this very podcast in a software called Logic, and I'm using my laptop to do it. Very, very convenient. I can do that anywhere in the world, and I can do that anytime, and I don't have to rent a studio space and so on and so forth. So for me, that podcast becomes a platform to have a chat about telling your story in this day and age. I will bring in some guests. That's definitely something I want to do, but also share some thoughts every week. And that's my commitment, because if you listen to my other podcast, the Brand Experience Podcast, you know that I haven't been consistent. I haven't been preaching from my own words about how to be consistent for your brand. And on this podcast, I intend to use it also, as a way to unwin and as a way to connect with a new audience. I am on YouTube, youtube.com/Fred Ranger, if you want to see the gear I'm using. And this is more of a channel where we talk about the in-depth reviews of the latest Fujifilm gear, because I'm a Fujifilm shooter, but more recently the Sony gear. So if you want to see the tools needed to tell your stories these days, you can definitely head to my YouTube channel. But this podcast, again, will be more about storytelling. Of course, the occasional camera news, because wow, it has also evolved a lot since the days that I first got into digital photography. I mean, I was in school and university studying communication, also taking some photography classes, and back then it was on film, and we had the dark room and all this great stuff. It was a great experience. But then I was one of the first to be really, really interested in digital. I remember back then we had some Kodak. Yes. Kodak had some of the first digital camera down there, and yeah, it was shitty. It was really, really shitty. But I knew that it was something different, something that was kind of a mix of art and a mix of science, and that has always appealed to me. So if you are interested in anything visual storytelling and storytelling overall, and the gear that we need to tell our stories in this day and age, well, please subscribe to this podcast. Do me a favor and hit that subscribe button that you're seeing on your Apple Podcast or your Google Play or your Spotify podcast, and you will not be deceived. I am intending on really, really connecting with you and actually bringing on some regular guests and some regular people, if I may say, not the YouTube superstars that you see. I mean, if there is a YouTube superstar who wants to come down a podcast, definitely I'll bring him in or bring her in. But at the end of the day, I want to connect with you. I want us to be growing and to tell even better stories at the end of the day. I am Fred Ranger. I am so happy to be launching this podcast. Hit me up on Twitter at Fred Ranger. You can also find me on Instagram at Fred Ranger. And you can also go on the website, fredranger.com, if you are interested in this podcast. Again, it's fredranger.com/visual storytelling. Thank you so much, and see you, or actually hear you, next week. Cheers.